Hey team, hey Facebook. Jumping on for my first ever Facebook Live. Hey team. Does anybody else love a good J-Boog? He is the man. Say hello as you're jumping on, team. I always find music kind of just gets me in the mood if I'm feeling a little nervous. I don't know how to see the comments. Hold on, let me see if I can change this settings. Might open it on my computer. Alrighty team, how are we? I'm just gonna open it on my computer because I can't see if there's any comments coming through. The settings have fully changed, which does not help at all. So I'm jumping on to my first Facebook Live in my actual space here. Say hello as you're jumping on. I've been doing Facebook Lives for a little bit now over in my Queendom Lounge. Okay, I can see. Hey Kelly, I'm looking on my computer because for some reason I can't see any comments. Hey Casey. Yeah, so hi. And yes, I've been doing some lives on my Queendom Lounge for quite some time now, and I thought it was time to drop into this space. For some reason, I created an awesome epic story around why I wasn't going to get in here and do Facebook Lives. For some reason, I was actually quite nervous about it. And then this morning, I was scrolling, hey Chris, scrolling aimlessly in social medias, and I come across this TikTok. And this TikTok was a gorgeous girl who has thousands of followers, and she was basically advertising her new engagement ring. Hey Claire, how are you, gorgeous? And the whole TikTok was about her ring, but underneath the photo of her ring, she had a hashtag, love has no boundaries. And I was like, oof, I need to speak into this. I want to ask, there's a couple of people on, what is your take on love has no boundaries? Do you believe that's true? Or do you believe that's not true? And there's no judgment, there's no getting it right or wrong, just interested in people's opinions of that. Do you think that love has no boundaries? And if you're watching this on replay, let me know you're watching it on replay and let me know what you think. And I'm gonna tell you what I think about it. And purely from, obviously boundaries are my thing. I love them, could talk about them for hours. But I'm just keeping an eye on over here what's happening. Essentially, when I read that and I seen it was a post going out to thousands upon thousands and thousands of people. Hey, Chris. It really made me feel icky. I've got to say, I was just like, no, this is not okay. This is not the message we want to get out. This is not a hashtag to start that love has no boundaries. And honestly, I think it is the complete opposite. And reason why I think it is the complete opposite is because if you don't know where you start and where you finish and the other person starts, essentially that's not love. Boundaries are around creating trust. They're around loving yourself and the other person while being protected by the boundary. It actually creates so much safety in a relationship. And whether that's with an intimate partner, friends, parents, it really cultivates a level of trust. It cultivates a level of safety. It cultivates a level of healthy boundaries, essentially. Hey, Jody, how are you guys? And so when I read that, I was like, no, essentially no. So if you see that hashtag floating around or you see it, get honest with yourself when you're reading stuff, remembering everything we take in on socials, we're taking it in. And if we're not mindful of what we're taking in, we can unconsciously think that that's just the way love is. And there was a point of time in my life where probably essentially I thought that's what love was, that I had to overstep my own boundaries. I had to give to others. I had to constantly go above and beyond what was okay for me in order to be loved. And to me, that is not healthy at all. And essentially, healthy boundaries are, how can you be protected? How can the other person be protected? And essentially trust yourself, them trust themselves, and then have healthy boundaries in between that. Porous boundaries are essentially you're disconnected for yourself and you're allowing so much stuff to come in. So what I mean by that is that you overgive, you allow people to drop their shit at your feet constantly, and you take on all of their stuff, you go in and try and fix it, and you have basically a real big backlog of crap. And essentially that's what a porous boundary is when you're connected but you're not protected. And then when we are connected but not protected, what tends to happen is like the brother and the sister of that is the opposite effect, which is your rigid boundary. And what happens and tends to happen is when we have really porous boundaries and we're operating out of a space of constantly outputting, constantly allowing, and it's like this allowance, this output, and we're constantly overstepping our own needs, we will flip the switch and we go to a rigid boundary, which is essentially you're protected by the boundary, but then you're not connected to other human beings. Let me know if this is landing for you guys. There's a couple of you on. I'm interested to hear. Give me a love heart or give me something to let me know that it's all making sense. So essentially what will happen is when you have porous boundaries, so love has no boundaries is porous, and you're essentially setting up a foundation in your relationships that my needs aren't important, your needs aren't important, or if they are, they're kind of in conflict. And so when we have really porous boundaries and then we switch the flick because we go to rigid because it's like, well, my needs aren't getting met, I'm overstepping, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, all these things play out. And then we go to the rigid boundary, and like ridges, I want you to think of like a brick wall. It pretty much cannot be moved without excessive force. And basically, rigid boundaries stop us from allowing ourselves to open up to the other people. Hence why it's protected, but it's not connected. And so when we have healthy boundaries, hey Adam, how are you? When we have healthy boundaries, we're both connected, but we're also protected in the relationship. And essentially, boundaries are communicating. Hey Danielle, how are you, gorgeous? Boundaries are communicating to your partner, in this case, because it was an engagement ring, I'm just going to go off this scenario. What are my needs? What are my desires? What are my preferences in this relationship? And speaking into that in such a healthy way that it has me so connected to you and so seen by you while still honoring myself and who I am. Because relationships aren't about coming together and it's like two souls coming together to make one. That's codependency. That's not what we're about. We're about two whole individuals that are already whole in their own ways, coming together basically to make a team, to essentially have things set up where their boundaries are so honored that you get to experience real interdependence within a container, within a unit. And so when I read something like love has no boundaries, to me, if I was to take that on, I would make an assumption, an observation that I don't know who I am. I don't know what my core needs are. Hey, Shanae, how are you, beautiful? Hey, Fiona. And I'm essentially allowing you to drive my life. I'm going to take the back seat while you basically dictate where this relationship is going. And essentially what it is going to have is it's going to have that rigid boundary come into play eventually, because over time you will become so burnt out and resentful within the relationship. And it's kind of just like that pressure cooker kind of response. When we allow and allow and allow and allow and allow, we essentially lose our shit. So boundaries really get to be a beautiful thing. And, you know, there is this myth that boundaries are really rigid and they have the person not being seen and heard. That's totally a myth. In a relationship, having healthy boundaries is the complete opposite that you get to experience. And it's something that I personally had to navigate in my life. You know, there was a time where I just thought I was just a mom or just a partner and that my needs being met weren't important. And it takes time to develop these muscles with boundaries and to know essentially what you need is so okay. And oftentimes we don't even know what we need. We are so disconnected to who we are that we don't actually really know what we need, or we do know what we need and we're not trusting ourselves enough to speak up and speak into it. So I hope this has made sense. Sorry, I'm just reading because my phone is not... Oh, love hearts. Thanks, guys. My phone is not showing me the comments for some reason. And when we are essentially opened up with healthy boundaries, it allows the new ideas, the new emotions, the new creativity to allow us to flow through. Hey, Fee. And so, when we have porous boundaries, essentially we just become really... Sorry, guys. Yeah. We become really lost in who we are. And it's not a nice place to be in. So boundaries we could talk about for so long. But essentially my core message here was that love has no boundaries is total bollocks. And comment and let me know what you think and what you experience in relationships, because getting your needs met is really a beautiful thing. And if it's something that's so familiar to you, just start by actually writing down, what do I need? What are my desires in my relationships, whether that's friendships or personal relationships? What are my preferences? What are my non-negotiables? Like, that's a really important one. And what are my deal breakers? You know, I only have 1 or 2 deal breakers in our relationship. And if those deal breakers were to be overstepped, the relationship as it currently is set up would change. And then I have negotiables, because boundaries get to be flexible, you know, and we can sometimes allow people really close, and other times we allow them a little bit further away. And that's why they get to be this really flexible, beautiful setup, that they're not that rigid thing that we assume they are and have arrogance to them. They get to be the complete opposite, you know. Kind of think of a house with a trespassing sign. And that trespassing sign is like, this is my boundary, like, do not step past this fence. But fences get to be moved as well. So we really get to decide on who we allow in and who we don't allow in. But it comes with having to know what our core needs are. And it's not until you get really honest with yourself and take the time out to write down what your core needs are in order to be able to get them met. Because people aren't mind readers. So us walking around, slamming down dishes, grunting under our breath, doing all those things that we do, thinking that the other person's going to pick up our signs, they're not. And this is what happens when we don't have boundaries. And this is why I do not agree with love has no boundaries, because it is essential in order for a relationship to be so healthy in such a safe way. Because I know that all of my needs and my boundaries and my desires are not the same as my partner's. And so us communicating about that sets up a really beautiful... As my partner is ringing and interrupting my live. That was him cutting me completely out. So yeah, essentially that's what I wanted to get on and chat about today. Hey Noel, how are you? If you see that floating around, I'd love to know what you think in regards to the love has no boundaries. And if you are working on your boundaries, what's coming up for you? I see all the laughing faces coming up on the screen. So my recommendation would be write down what your needs are, write down what your desires are, write down what your non-negotiables are. Oh, hey Dan, thanks for cutting us off right in the middle of our live. I appreciate it, babe. And just get really honest with yourself, and over time it's going to feel uncomfortable, but the more and more that you learn to communicate your boundaries and your needs, the stronger that muscle will get, and there will be less charge to it. So there won't be as much guilt, there won't be as much, this feels so uncomfortable, this feels not right, this feels like I'm a bad person. And that's just because you're developing a new area. We weren't taught boundaries at school. We weren't taught boundaries at all, really. And essentially the boundary blueprint that we currently have set up in our lives comes from our childhood. And then, you know, we adopt different ones along the way. So until you actually decide to take on what your current boundary blueprint essentially is and start to investigate it and look into it, that your boundaries are essentially going to be the same way. So start asking yourself some powerful questions. Hope this helped, guys. My first ever Facebook Live. Thanks for everyone that joined me, and I'll definitely be back for more.